perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following a few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again. I'm Harry Greenberger. I'm the president of the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association. Our guest today is a member of our organization and also serves on our board of directors. He is Jim Dugan. Jim, after working as a computer systems analyst for more than 20 years, decided to go back to graduate school and is now nearing completion of a PhD in anthropology at Tulane University. We are, as you know, and as you saw in our opening segment, we are dedicated to the application of science and reason for understanding the universe and solving our problems. And so Jim's going to talk to us about some people and some ideas that do not rely on science and reason. And Jim, tell us what this is all about.
Well, what it's all about is pseudoscience, which are materials that are trying to sell a certain kind of idea that is really about the material world, about something that's tangible, and that tries to marshal evidence but just fails miserably in any kind of scientific sense. And this tends to be a very profitable genre, often of bestsellers.
And I'm not sure what you're referring to. Who are these people? What are these concepts?
Some of them are things like creationist and intelligent design literature, which
we're familiar with that.
Indeed, and most experts would classify them as pseudoscience, not science at all. Okay. God was an ancient astronaut, Atlantis, the lost continent of Lemuria, ancient mother civilizations of high technology, ghost hunting, all kinds of things like that.
Well, in respect to one of the things you mentioned, there is a series of programs on TV on the History Channel regarding ancient aliens, and there's show after show where they produce a well-produced show, and with proof that there had to be alien life forms here on Earth in order for certain things to have developed. This show is on the History Channel. Are they all just mistaken?
I don't think they're just mistaken. I think they're ridiculous. I've watched a few recently and was really struck by how weak any kind of argumentation was and how they work so hard to kind of pull in anything, whether it's the Loch Ness Monster or some odd archaeological artifact as proof of ancient aliens visiting the Earth, and no kind of logic, no kind of rules of evidence really seem to apply at all.
But just because they haven't found the Loch Ness Monster doesn't mean it's not there.
Well, that's of course quite true, as far as it goes.
Okay, but that's probably, the Loch Ness is probably minor compared to the other claims that you are prepared to dispute.
Yes.
All right, well, tell us about all that.
Well, I prepared a small slideshow, so if we can have our slides up, I can talk a little bit about pseudoscience. 10 ways to tell you're wasting your time, mostly because there's so much material out there. How can you, as a consumer, spot quickly that you're about to have your time hugely wasted? And as I said, pseudoscientific literature mostly are books and videos, other materials that try to sell a theory about nature or history. That is something that's in the realm of tangible facts. We're not talking about philosophy or religion here. And these are sources that claim to persuade by means of material evidence.
Which is what a theory requires, having
in a scientific
evidence. Yes.
And they're trying to bring material evidence, artifacts, or logic and reason. But they fail abominably to adhere to any kind of rules of marshaling scientific evidence together. Nevertheless, these tend to become very popular. As I said, a lot of these are best-selling books, very popular TV shows, and obviously people are making money off of this.
I see. Well, that's a good reason for doing a lot of things, to make money.
Making money is a good motivation.
Okay, go ahead.
And we can see some examples of some great books, very popular, some of these bestsellers about creationism, about God being an ancient astronaut, about there being some ancient mother civilization that had to have taught all the ancient Maya, Inca, and Egyptians how to do what they were doing, about the end of the world in 2012.
Well, we don't know whether that's going to be valid or not because it's only 2011.
I predict a really fun party.
All right. Now, I see on the
31st.
screen on the left-hand side a red book that says Atlas of Creation, and you also have that on the table in front of you.
I do.
What is that?
This enormous book. This is a really fine example of pseudoscientific material. And this book was produced in Turkey. It is an example of creationist literature.
But it's written in English.
It's written in English.
Yes.
From a Muslim perspective, which mostly takes Christian creationist thinking and just twists it a little bit here and there to make it a little more Islamic. This book appeared in the mailboxes of many academics around the United States and the rest of the world, unrequested, obviously at great expense, an attempt to
To the producer, but not to the recipient.
Oh no, it was completely free to the recipients.
Okay.
This had to be an allocation of a lot of money to getting a creationist idea marketed out there in the world, and it's a very finely produced book.
Well, when I just flipped through it before the show, I saw pictures in there that looked like they were supporting the evolutionary theory. How does that fit into their Atlas of Creation?
Well, that's probably not the way they would like it to be interpreted. But they do have some magnificent photographs of fossils and unusual life forms, and certainly someone who actually understands evolutionary theory would find support for evolutionary theory in this material, although that's probably not what the publisher actually intended.
They use the same information to support their theory of creationism.
Indeed they do.
I see. Now, I interrupted your slideshow.
Well, if we can go back to our slideshow, we have also some examples of pseudoscientific television. We have these very popular ghost hunters programs, Finding Bigfoot, which appears on the Animal Planet. People are hunting for Sasquatch in the woods, and of course our shared favorite now, Ancient Aliens, which appears on the History Channel. And
I understand that you have watched that show.
I have watched it and was genuinely shocked at how bad it really was.
Well, not badly produced, but,
No.
but badly conceived. Is that what you're saying?
Poorly thought out and totally lacking in scientific value, but very well produced.
It is a quality production that is not inexpensive, but as you said, they're probably making a lot of money on it. Now, I noticed that you also talked about ghosts, and we're in New Orleans, where tourists can pay for a haunted house tour. Are they going to see and hear something that's going to be convincing?
I have gone on a few of those tours, and I've never seen anything even remotely convincing. Those are for entertainment purposes.
I see. All right. Well, tell me more about the pseudoscience.
Well, I think that as a consumer of this kind of material, you can't just at a glance say, oh, this is pseudoscientific nonsense and this is solid science, although the glitzy cover might often be a hint in its own right. But I think there are some red flags, some warnings that jump out at you if you look at these materials that are very common, and often you can tell quickly just at skimming through the bibliography or something like that, that you're about to have your time and money wasted.
And what is it that you see in the bibliography that leads you to that conclusion?
Well, if we can go on to the next slide, I'll start to describe some of the hints that you might find. One is this claim, probably would find it in the first or second chapter of many of these books, oh, scientists are just so closed-minded. This, of course, can be true. A lot of these things are half true, so that makes them even more dangerous in some ways because it gives them a little bit of credibility. Scientists are people too. Yeah, sometimes scientists don't always want to give up their pet ideas. But if somebody's saying this, it's probably because they were thrown out of somebody's office or got a really bad review or were told they were an idiot by one or more scientists at some point. And you'll find this all the time in books on UFOs, psychic phenomena, creationism, about complaining that scientists are so closed-minded when in fact the proponents of some alternative simply have not brought scientific evidence to the table.
And you are now giving them the opportunity to say that you're closed-minded.
And I'm sure they do. But I think it's always impressive how fast science and scientific paradigms change when real evidence is brought to the table.
All right. Carry on.
Thank you. Reliance on popular sources, and you can tell that very quickly going through the bibliography of a book. There's nothing wrong with popular sources, like say Discover magazine would be a very high quality popular source, but part of what makes them popular is they gloss over details, minimize difficulties. A lay person who reads popular sources can be a very well-informed layperson, but nobody's going to become an expert in anything by reading popular sources. And if the bibliography of your book has a lot of popular sources and few or no real technical reports, peer-reviewed journal articles, and that sort of thing, it's probably not a very reliable source of technical argumentation.
Now, the other books that you have on the table with you, are they the kind of books you're now talking about?
Certainly.
What are they?
Fingerprints of the Gods, a personal favorite, which talks about an ancient mother civilization of very advanced technology here on Earth, and also that the entire crust of the surface of the Earth shifts from time to time, moving continents out of their positions.
There's some support for that. Continents shifting.
But this book, quoting popular sources and having some other kinds of the characteristics that I'm going to go through today, doesn't really bring current scientific thinking about moving continents to bear. It brings some half-understood, very outdated concepts of that to the table.
I know that this is a book in particular that you want to talk about, but what are the others you have there on the table?
Oh, The Troubled Waters of Evolution, a hit piece on creationism, that is a hit piece against evolution in favor of creationism, The Genesis Flood, This is a classic among creationists.
There's all kinds of evidence of the flood.
Where?
I keep seeing and reading that there is evidence of that massive flood.
There is, of course, evidence of many local and regional floods, some quite severe. There's no evidence of a one-time world-girding of
that wiped
flood
out
anywhere.
wiped out all the people except one family. Why would God do that?
Well, now that's a theological question, not a scientific one.
All right.
And also a personal favorite, America BC.
What is that?
This is actually written by a credible scientist, a zoologist, but speaking very far outside of his area of expertise, who claims that there have been many different kinds of old world visitations to the Americas, and he finds Phoenician inscriptions and Celtic inscriptions and all kinds of material like that all over North America.
And is he an anthropologist
He is
like
not.
you?
He is not. He's gone now, but he was a zoologist and somehow took up an interest in this kind of thing and probably stepped a little too far outside of his area of expertise.
I see. Well, continue.
If we can move to my next slide, relying on other pseudoscientific sources is a big problem. And again, you can tell in the bibliography. Pseudoscientific literature often forms a closed system, and it's a huge example of garbage in, garbage out.
They're quoting each other.
They're quoting each other, and if you, especially creationist literature, if you trace back who's quoting what from whom, eventually you're going to come to the Genesis flood, quoting Donnelly's book about Atlantis, the antediluvian world, or Velikovsky's The Worlds in Collision, where Venus was a rogue comet that was trapped by the Earth's gravity and caused the parting of the Red Sea, or things like that.
Yes. Well, now, did you reject these concepts before you decided to become an anthropologist, or is that what opened your eyes?
I think I was pretty skeptical about a lot of these things all along.
Okay, all right.
But I think one of the things that anthropology has done for me is that I kind of look at this almost as a field of study now, focusing on the nature of human beings in society. We start to ask questions about why people believe very strange things, and how they form personal and group identities around very unusual beliefs.
And you find some answers to questions like that in your study of anthropology?
Yes.
All right. Well, I think you still have some slides that you might want to...
Well, building on obsolete scholarship is common in these. That is, quoting sources that are way out of date and trying to make it work based on very old ideas instead of the current thinking in any scientific field.
All right.
The next slide. Just not grasping accepted theory, and certainly creationist literature is a huge example where reading this you get an idea of what evolution is about that has nothing to do with what the scientific theory actually says. They've created their own version of creationist thinking. Next slide, please. A huge problem in all of these that makes pseudoscience pseudoscientific is vagueness about technology and about energy. And they'll just float these words around like they're precise and explanatory when they don't really tell you anything. So ghosts are made out of energy, or Easter Island has a magnetic anomaly, or the pyramids were built with advanced technology. These terms don't really tell you anything.
All right, but now, just with the word energy, which can be applied to in many, many ways, what is it that these pseudoscientists are doing specifically regarding energy, which of course is, I guess, a subject for physicists?
Well, should be. I don't think it is very often. If you watch the Ghost Hunter program on television, for example, people will have various kinds of detectors for magnetic energy.
Yes. And they get readings.
And they get readings, but haven't established the background, haven't explained to anybody what these things are really measuring, nor do they really have an explanatory model for what a ghost is and how it manifests energy of different kinds or puts them to work. So you just kind of have to take it on their say-so that the glowing light on the indicator means a spirit presence.
All right. Well, those people who support the concept of an afterlife, that when you die, something leaves your body that continues. And that, I think, is described by some of them as a form of energy, which then could then be translated into the ghost in this house where someone died. Has that been disproven?
Well, I don't know if you can disprove a sufficiently vague claim like that, but I don't think there's very good evidence in favor of the idea. Again, they're using this word energy to mean almost anything. Get specific.
All right, but when you say the idea, are you including afterlife in any form?
Well, how can you, if you accept the Cartesian dichotomy that there's spirit and there's material, then spirit is entirely untestable, right? You can't put it in a test tube. But if you start to say a spirit is energy and not just something undetectable, now you're back in the realm of science, and you should be able to measure it.
Energy is measurable, but spirit is not.
Theoretically, yes.
Well, so then where does you understand where I'm coming from? I'm an atheist, and I do not accept any form of afterlife. As far as I'm concerned, when you're dead, you become fertilizer. Well, how do anthropologists look at afterlife?
Well, for the field of anthropology, afterlife is a set of beliefs that different cultures have and different peoples have, and we would study that comparatively in terms of this group of people believe X, this group of people believe Y. We might ask cognitive questions about why they have those beliefs, what functions those beliefs serve. As to whether any of that is true in any sense, that's not really an anthropological question. It's not relevant to the field of anthropology.
All right. Well, I frequently interrupt you, so continue.
Going on to the next slide, interpreting other people's symbols as if they come from our own culture is a huge problem with the pseudoscientific literature.
What is that a picture of on that slide?
Well, I'm not sure that we know. It's probably a presentation of some kind of bird or insect. But of course, the God was an ancient astronaut set would say it illustrates some kind of flying machine.
From an extraterrestrial flew into the
quite possibly, and it's very ancient, and therefore there were ancient astronauts here. And the mistake is we interpret it that as an airplane, not the ancient people who actually put that thing together.
That's what that number 7 is telling us. Okay.
And a personal favorite, ancient people couldn't have known about the value of pi, circumference of the earth, how to transport enormous heavy stone objects, things like that. Of course, ancient people did know a lot of these things, and just throwing up your hands and saying, oh, aliens had to have done it because ancient people couldn't possibly have known about things that obviously they did because the buildings are there, the objects are there. That's kind of a silly line of reasoning.
When I watch shows of this type, and the question arises, how did they move like the stones for the pyramid and some other massive monuments? How did they?
Well, in some cases that's known, and in some cases I don't think we really have a complete answer for how they moved some of those things.
And on the pyramids, they had to keep stacking them higher and higher.
But the alternative explanation is also completely without any kind of evidence. If there was some high technology that was around at the time the pyramids were built, where are the physical remains of that? Where is the metal that couldn't possibly have been alloyed by the technology of that time?
The extraterrestrials took it back with them.
They had to be very, very tidy.
Jim, we're approaching the end of our show, and my impression is that there's much more to be said on the subject of pseudoscience, and I would hope that we can then do some follow-up shows. What are some areas that we could explore further that you might have in mind?
There's so many. You can look at specific books or specific programs or specific themes like creationism, the mysterious crystal skulls, supposedly objects that exist that couldn't possibly have been produced in the time period in which they were produced. God was an ancient astronaut literature, Bigfoot. We can pick any one of those themes and amplify them and look at them in great detail.
I think our audience would be interested in that. Now, I know that the one thing that we need to get you back for is regarding this book that was called Fingerprints of the Gods, and you have prepared a lengthy critique of that book, which we didn't have time to get into today, but you'd be willing to come back and pick up on that subject, I presume.
I would love to.
All right. We have a few minutes left. Tell the audience anything you want to tell them, or you may still have some more slides to run. I don't know.
Well, let's see. Maybe I can do one more slide, if we have a moment to bring that up.
Well, I think maybe he will. There you are.
Another one of those lines of explanation. Science can't explain why there's something rather than nothing, the origins of the genetic code, something like that.
Yes.
And of course there are unknowns in science, but that mere fact doesn't upend the entirety of science, nor does it support any particular theory of an alternative explanation. All you're saying when you say, oh, science doesn't know the answer to that is kind of a logical divide by zero. You can say anything after that. It doesn't really tell you anything.
But scientists are willing to say there are some things we don't know.
Of course, there's a great deal we don't know.
There are people on the other side who say that they have an answer to everything because the answer is God, and anything that you can bring up, it's His creation, and He works in mysterious ways.
Which is basically an agreement to stop thinking, all right? Because we can't understand it. It's a mystery of God and end of human thought right there.
I see. Well, let me just ask you this, because we're just about at the end, and you've been out at Tulane sometime working on your degree. Are the other anthropologists of the same mind as you? Do you all have discussions where you don't all agree on matters?
Oh, there's a lot of disagreement on almost anything among anthropologists. Many different opinions on many different ideas.
All right. Well, we're going to hear from you again on that, and I just want to thank our audience for being with us today. And I'm sure that you will enjoy some future programs on this topic.